All right, we're live. Hey, I'm gonna roll with this. Anybody that checks in, hopefully we'll rewind. I'm just gonna do this chat style, but get to a point and move on. ACAS did a really good video this morning talking about the false flag scenarios, and he was, to get to the point, saying um, that he thought there was gonna be it'd be a nuclear EMP like device, something thermonuclear size, to get us into the next situation because it had to be bigger and badder than all the last fake events, right? Um, well, I disagree with that. Actually, um, I think it would be easy to get us into a war, but war is not the war to end all be all. That's not the end of the means. the The goal is control, right? So to control things, they're gonna need to scare people, just like they have in the previous events. The idea is to get fear into people, to not know what's going on, to manipulate them into doing what they want, right? That's the ultimate goal. So just kicking off a war for war's sake is not the thing. And while thermonuclear device or nuclear inside the states is catastrophic, it doesn't necessarily meet the end of the goal. Um, but what I think he's getting at there is more of along the lines of a Jericho scenario. And we talked about this because he briefly talked about the South Carolina incident several years ago where there was supposedly nuclear uh, material lost off the coast of South Carolina. If you remember that, several years back under Obama, I believe it was. Um, and that is the thing. There's these different competing factions within the government, like Jericho, and they end up going at each other and put the public in the dark to fight over the power control of the country itself. That is a scenario. If that like that happened in the states, I think that's what we would be going towards, because Jericho seemed to be very much over the target, if you know what I'm saying. Because to get us into a war with Iran or something, I mean, they can do it without even doing a false flag. Do they want to get the public's buy-in? Sure. Um, it's obviously not necessary. All I have to do is keep people divided and have one side back it and the other side don't. You've already got most of the red hat wearers, people that wear the red hats around. Um, I should say the MAGA hats, because the red hat means something personal. We don't want to implicate those like Andy and those who cherish the red hat. So that's a different type of hat. Um, the MAGA hat wearing people are already bought into the Iran being the enemy and the devil. So war is going to be justified. It's just a matter of making it justified, right? Um, so that's not their problem. Their problem, they don't need a false event to get us into war there. They will do it whether we like it or not. It's something to think about. But going back to the Jericho scenario, and this got me thinking after I saw his video. I was jumping rope listening to his video. I thought I did pretty good. I jumped rope for most of that 16 minutes. That was a pretty good deal. But the Jericho scenario probably won't be as catastrophic as the show itself. But if they get into something that they want to divide and distract, or divide the populace, they will create an event like in Oklahoma City, for example, but worse this time, and blame it on internal forces to put the population in a state of fear to eradicate those who oppose them. And that got me going down the rabbit trail, thinking about, second. Thinking about bugging out now. Because in a scenario where they don't go full EMP like Jericho, but they do put fear into the populace that these quote unquote sovereign citizens are a bane to the existence of the United States and we are the enemy. Because that's just what they're going to frame you. They did so in the MIAC report to everybody who pretty much is in this circle, right? So there is a categorized and prioritized list they would be going down, and it made bugging out seem awfully real all of a sudden when you think about it, as I think about it, because it's like if they go into that scenario, The urban places are going to be more safe, believe it or not, than out here in the more dispersed areas of the country. I'm slightly rural. I'm not fully rural like some people. I'm not like Pastor Joe Fox or nothing like that, which are even probably at more risk, because if they can convince the American people that the threat is so bad in a Jericho-like scenario where the people are fighting each other internally in the country, drone strikes will be a dime a dozen. They've already got a generation of warfighters that have no compunction with drone striking things into oblivion just because they're given orders. So that is already built into the psyche of the people that do it. Justifying it would be very difficult, no doubt. There's a lot of people who would like take a step back, like, wait, we're doing drone strikes in America on regular Americans, right? But there's a small leap between that and putting enough fear into people and then letting them make it, and they will do it. And I think that's the real concern there, is like, once you get into that Jericho scenario and that where they're putting the fear in the populace to control them to the point they will be dropping those strikes in the rural areas, especially in the red areas, especially in places even, and just prioritizing their list. You know, who is their biggest threats? Is it Southern Prepper 1 and Joe Fox? There's a lot of people that aren't on the internet that are off the radar that are going to get hit first, because they are the most dangerous, because they have been doing this for decades and have sizable influence in groups, and these are the people that have been talking to their local sheriff and are high school buddies with their local sheriff, and those are the ones that are really going to go after in these rural areas, in those we'll call them false flag events for lack of a better word, but things they use to instill fear in the public and pit sides against each other. And then the bugging out and bugging into the city could be a real concern, believe it or not. I said it, because you're going to be safer there, because they're not going to start drone striking built up areas. I'll say built up, not necessarily cities, but even like Carson City here is big enough to where you can blend into the populace and not, you're too much of a collateral damage risk. And they can, once they find you in those areas, they can come after you, more so. They don't want to send in SWAT in places to, these large property parcel areas where people are rural and try to SWAT them on those areas. But once they get you in an urban area and got you isolated, SWAT's no problem. They've got that technique down to that's their jam, right? They've been perfecting those techniques. So that would be no problem. So now it's got me thinking about bugging out, which is always the last worst case, right? And that if that scenario came down and there are people being drone striked right and left because of some perceived event that has went down that has framed people as the sovereign citizen types, the patriot types, the all those different pejoratives they're going to put on it to make you look like the bad guy, where do I bug out to? Because nobody wants to bug out to the city. I might go visit Chance down there. He's dug down in Southern California, so maybe we'll go there. I guess it would just depend on the climate and how quickly things go in the bigger picture. I don't necessarily think that I am far enough up on the list to warrant a drone strike in the early phase. But anybody who has had contact with these movements, with these groups, Delaware Patriot, any of that type of action, you're on a prioritized list, and somebody's got it, good or friend or foe, and it's mutually shared between these people. And they're going, there are good and bad people in the powers that be within these agencies, the three-letter agencies that compete for control, but they're all sharing the same list because they are generating it for different reasons, right? So it's going to fall into the hands of the bad guys eventually, and will it get over to the guys over at Langley who are going to control these things and decide who gets on the red list and who's on the yellow and green, however they prioritize it. So I guess that's just another case of when bugging out might be possible or concerning or needed. Internal strife to the point to where the major weapons of the state are used against you before enough resistance is formed to mitigate the usage of those weapons. Maybe that's the way to put it. but those out in the rural area would be at most risk, and I think that would include me and many of you on here. Just something I hadn't thought about, I think, or I don't know, I hadn't thought it that deeply about it. Bugging out and going to the city is just not something that pleases you, right? It's almost like going to a FEMA camp, right? But go check out ACAS's discussion. I really think that gets to the gist of the Jericho scenario with that show and why it was canceled. And if that's really the way that it's going to go, it's going to be. That's they were over the target. That's why the show was canceled. That's what we always said, right? So, just some thoughts on ACAS's video, and really the worst of all scenarios is bugging out and going into a built-up urban area. Like, talk about something you didn't want to do, right? Like, man, I never thought of that. You wouldn't be able to take nearly the amount of stuff you would go into a rural bug out location, right? So you'd be mitigating a lot of your advantages, even to bugging out to a rural location. But having to bug out and go to an urban location is like things are very, very bad. But to avoid the tactical strike that's probably coming in some of those scenarios is kind of the idea. So I don't know, long wandering thoughts here. Thanks everybody that checked in. I didn't want to ignore you, but I just wanted to get this out. I saw Die Bullfrog check in, Uncle Al, Iron Witch, Christina Thompson. Hey, Mountain Man. Hey, what's going on? Good morning. Hey, thanks for checking in, everybody. I'll read your comments later. Comment down below. We got to go get ready for the JOB. Mountain Man doesn't get this term bugging in. What's the person do? Hide. No, bugging in just means you stay in the house. This means you stay where you're at. It's just a term to, you bunker in, you just stay where you're at. It's not like anything special, Mountain Man. It's just another term for I'm staying put, staying where I'm at, that's all it means. Don't read too much into it, Mountain Man. But thanks everybody for checking in. If you didn't see the very beginning, go back and check out the beginning of this. If you're just checking in, this will upload, but just wanted to get those thoughts out this morning and check out ACAS's video, which I put in the description box below. Definitely worth talking about. So just some thoughts there, YouTube. Have a good day. Live free.